Okay, we can start.
Thank you. I welcome you to this webinar on crowdfunding in the blue economy. This webinar is being organized by Insular, the Insular Chambers of Commerce and Industry of the European Union, assisted by the Gozo Business Chamber and Rethymno Development Agency, as part of the project entitled Capacity Building of Blue Economy Stakeholders to Effectively Use Crowdfunding. The main scope of this webinar is to highlight the importance of the blue economy and to provide participants with the basic elements of crowdfunding as an important financing tool. Today we have two important speakers with us, Dr. Samuel Azzopardi and Matthew Caruana. Dr. Samuel Azzopardi is the President of the Gozo Region and representative of the European Committee of the Regions on the Blue Economy. Dr. Azzopardi was also a rapporteur on the opinion paper Initiative for the Sustainable Development of the Blue Economy in the Western Mediterranean, published by the European Committee of the Regions. We also have with us today Matthew Caruana. Matthew is a business innovator, coach, and mentor with a proven track record for driving project success from the grassroots up. Passionate about startups and entrepreneurship, Matthew's involvement has been integral to the successful launch of countless projects across various economic and social spheres. Matthew is also the manager of Malta's leading crowdfunding platform ZAAR, and today he will provide us with useful insights on crowdfunding as an important financing tool. Kindly feel free to post your comments during the session. All of those who are participating on our online platform, please feel free to post your question, which will be answered by our two speakers. We will also be having a dedicated question and answer session after the two presentations. I would like you to know that the session is also being transmitted live on our Facebook page. And since this is a project which is being co-financed by the European Regional Development Fund, we would like to inform you that we will be taking screenshots of the event to be featured on our social media and website. So those who would not like to feature, please feel free to turn off your camera. To this end, we hope you will find this session useful. I now kindly invite Insular President Joseph Borch to make his introductory remarks.
Thank you, Daniel, for your introduction. Good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. And it is with pleasure today that I welcome you as President of Insular for this webinar on crowdfunding for blue economy projects. You might know, and possibly most of you know, that Insular is the organization which represents the Insular Chambers of Commerce and Industry of the European Union. During the COVID-19 pandemic, that is also now, island economies have been impacted very negatively, mostly because of their over-reliance on the tourism sector. COVID-19 pandemic has shown us the importance of trying to look beyond this and to look into new ways of how we can make our island economies more sustainable. New initiatives in blue economy are surely one of them, given that the sea is an important resource for all islands. And crowdfunding is surely an innovative way on how we can translate these initiatives into reality. Blue economy can be defined as the set of human activities depending on sea and or underpinned by land-sea interactions in the context of sustainable development. This can include both marine-based activities, such as fisheries and aquaculture, and marine-related activities, such as ship repair and port activities. The potential is great, the potential is immense. Nonetheless, as highlighted in the definition quoted above, there is a delicate balance which we need to achieve. Any progress or development made must be sustainable. Thus, it must not impinge on the ability of future generations to enjoy the marine environment. I would like to thank once again our speakers, Dr. Samuel Azzopardi and Matthew Caruana. Now I leave the floor to Dr. Samuel Azzopardi, Blue Economy representative for the Committee of the Regions. It's in your hands, Samuel.
You can unmute your mic, Samuel.
For that technology, finding the button. First I would like to thank the Gozo Business Chamber and Insular for this opportunity for the European Committee of the Regions to talk about something which is very at heart to myself and to the European Committee of the Regions, that being the blue economy. I've been a member of the European Committee of the Regions for the past 10 years. As Joe said, the President of Insular, COVID affected all of us, even the work, how we do it, and also led us to rethink on many issues and many opportunities, blue economy being one of them. In the European Committee of the Regions, I authored a report on the blue economy in the Mediterranean and have worked on the topic with other colleagues throughout the years. On European level, blue economy is very important because we think that there is still unused potential in the European maritime economy. As today's event is rightly about the blue economy, it is important to define what exactly the blue economy is understood to be. The standard definition is that the blue economy is and represents all economic activities at sea. This definition, however, is too restrictive in my opinion, as it does not account for some economic activities related but not taking place at sea. For example, all equipment used on a ship is produced on land, although exclusively produced to create added value at sea. If we take, for example, bed and mattresses on a cruise ship, they create economic value at sea, but are most probably produced in a landlocked region. An interesting example we like to point out is that the matter of location of the American company Garmin, producing among others navigation equipment, its headquarters are situated in Olathe, Kansas, which is a region as landlocked as it gets, and the company itself is incorporated and registered in Switzerland. Why this extended definition is important? Those of you already working with European projects know that the wording of the programming conditions to receive an EU grant is very important, and sometimes those conditions have also geographical aspects. In this sense, it can be very important to pay attention to the smallest details, as very often European maritime policy does not provide dedicated funding, but relies on funding from the Research Fund Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe in the new programming period, and the structural and investment funds, being the European Regional Development Fund, the ERDF, the European Social Funds, the ESF, the Cohesion Fund, the CF, the European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development, the EAFRD, and the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, the EMFF. As you can see, there is some dedicated fund for maritime and fisheries via the EMFF. However, at this point, this is mainly a fisheries instrument with a very low percentage dedicated to integrated maritime policy. This led to the European Committee of the Regions in the opinion I authored to tackle this as well. In fact, I would like to also delve a bit on the opinion which I authored, the Initiative for the Sustainable Development of the Blue Economy in the Western Mediterranean. And the main points of this opinion is that it considers that unless safety and security measures are effectively in place and duly enforced in the region, the blue economy cannot operate sustainably and effectively. It concurs that a smart and resilient blue economy can only be attained through the adoption of a culture of constant innovation and knowledge sharing and the promotion of sustainable competitiveness and economic activities. It fully agrees with the action promoting the development of small-scale fisheries and aquaculture and the dissemination of best practices in order to enhance the fishing and aquaculture industry whilst ensuring proper regional data collection and specific scientific evaluation in full respect of international legislation. It also encourages the exchange of best practices, capacity building, and cross-border cooperation between local and regional authorities from all sides of the Mediterranean. The initiative of the European Commission, to which my opinion refers, for the sustainable development of the blue economy in the Western Mediterranean is based on the Union for the Mediterranean Ministerial Declaration on the Blue Economy, wherein participating countries were invited and encouraged to explore the added value and feasibility of appropriate maritime strategies at sub-regional level and build on the experience of the 5+5 dialogue. In October 2016, the Foreign Affairs Ministers of Algeria, France, Italy, Libya, Malta, Mauritania, Morocco and Portugal, Spain and Tunisia encouraged further work on an initiative for the sustainable development of the blue economy, together with the Union for the Mediterranean Secretariat. This led in the 19th April 2007 declaration published communication by the European Commission stating officially the Initiative for the Sustainable Development of the Blue Economy in the West Med. The initiative has the purpose to develop the maritime economy in the Western Mediterranean by realizing its full potential and aims to achieve 3 additional goals in the implementation process, which I also dealt in the opinion, being increased safety and security, promote sustainable blue growth and jobs, preserve ecosystems and biodiversity. This goal setting is, as you can see, very ambitious and goes beyond the scope of sea basin strategies in their traditional form. A success in achieving the goals of the strategy will be also a success for EU diplomacy as counterparts in the EU member states emanating from the region. There are also practical issues regarding the implementation of the strategy. Implementation and efficient reporting are key to the success. The ability to efficiently provide information and assessment of completed ongoing and planned projects is crucial for the success of a strategy. In this case, it will involve coordination with managing authorities of non-EU countries, which adds additional complexity. The supporting mechanisms. Defining the exact role of the supporting mechanisms can be vital for the success of the strategy. The roles can spread from publicity and events only to operational help in funding applications and providing help and expertise for less experienced regions to apply or prepare their operational programs. The location of the existing mechanisms and the local outreach to focal points is also very important. Fisheries in the Mediterranean can be a deal breaker for any initiative, and the same goes for environment protection, fight against marine litter and plastics. Important element here is the elaboration of a mechanism for control and enforcement of reached agreements. The funding of the projects under the initiative also should continue to be a priority topic, and in the same time, one that should be approached very carefully. Although we are aware that under normal conditions, no additional funding is attributed exclusive to sea-based strategies, the EU side needs to communicate this clearly to all partners. Therefore, I go to the last part of my delivery, which is the challenges and opportunities for the public financing of the blue economy from the point of view of regional and local authorities, that is, the sub-national level. The budgets of local and regional authorities are under heavy constraints, not leaving much room for additional public spending. Over the years, local and regional authorities have relied on financing from Europe, especially in structurally weaker regions. However, now it is clear that only EU grants are not enough to accomplish all needed projects. Starting with the last programming period, and now even more for the next multi-annual financing period 2021-2027, the EU proposes several new ways of funding projects. Firstly, fund blending. That is, EU grants are derived from several EU structural and investment funds, which is going to be a new practice. Hybrid financing through EU grants and loans or financial instruments. We have to know that loans and financial instruments must be repaid unless specific special criteria apply. Intention is to leverage public financing. Thirdly, financial instruments loans only via European Investment Bank and national partner financial institutions. The difference between EU grants and financial instruments is that EU grants represent public financing, strict rules and control according to financial regulations. Money can be spent only according to the rules of the European Structural and Investment Funds. Member states manage and distribute the money via national operational programs. This creates opportunities to finance programs. That financial instruments are based on the EIB issued, that is the European Investment Bank, issued that obligations. Only the conditions of the signed bilateral contract count, which makes them a preferred choice for expensive and complicated projects that are expected to deliver economic return in the future. And therefore, the idea to conclude of exploring crowdfunding in the blue economy is surely a very interesting concept and proposal that should be thoroughly explored. I thank you for listening to my delivery.
I think we can proceed with Matthew.
Hi. So I'm sharing my screen. Just bear with me.
Yes, we can see that. Yes.
This one. Excellent. So first of all, thank you to the Gozo Business Chamber and Insular for inviting me to give this presentation about crowdfunding. It's a topic close to heart, and we believe a lot in its concept. And as Samuel was mentioning, it is also gaining traction, and a lot of activity is happening with respect to blue economy projects, be it from, let's say, social projects or social initiatives such as cleanups or rehabilitation or restorations, but also business activity, energy, and it goes into different sectors. So first of all, I would like to give a bit of an introduction of where we're coming from. I come from the crowdfunding platform in Malta, ZAAR, And this was a platform, is a platform that was set up by the University of Malta and the Malta Business Bureau in an attempt to facilitate and improve the situation in terms of access to finance with respect to entrepreneurial or social projects, which obviously struggle in attracting funds, either through public funds or bank loans. And we believe that crowdfunding could be an excellent source of finance that supplements or can join in the traditional sources as we were used to. Just to clarify a bit of terminology, I would like to specify this. There are times where the terms crowdsourcing and crowdfunding are intertwined and used as if they're one and the same thing. In my opinion, and you'll find various interpretations of this, I think crowdfunding should be seen as one subset of crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing could be sourcing of ideas, sourcing of knowledge, but can also be time and sort of hands-on crowdsourcing in terms of the time and the work. But we're dealing here with funding, where it comes to the actual funds to sustain or to initiate a project. And I also put a subset there for crowd investing, again, to be a bit more specific when it comes to the various types of crowdfunding that I'll explain later on. In brief, the slide tries to give a very brief overview of crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is a concept where you've had an idea, you have a project in mind of whatever nature, we'll get to that later. You go on a platform, an online platform, and you create the project there. You communicate this to the cloud. The crowd gives you money to fund the projects that you are talking about. There's a whole network building in terms of sharing, and the word needs to get out there. And then, because a lot of people know about it and a lot of people donate or give money or contribute to the project, the target is reached and your idea becomes a reality. So this is a quick overview, a very simplistic view of crowdfunding, but it's good to start from this point if someone is not fully aware of what crowdfunding is. So the difference is that we're dealing here is that traditionally funding used to be a one-to-one relationship. So you go to a bank or you have a grant, an institution gives you funds and you build the project or you start the idea that you have in mind. Now we're dealing with crowdfunding, where with small sums from a lot of individuals, you turn up with the same amount of money, but sourced from different sources. And this is the major difference between traditional funding and crowdfunding. Now we're also seeing, as also somewhere clearly mentioned before, that crowdfunding is not just funding from the crowd, as in individuals from the public, but institutions are joining in, be it venture capitalists, be it business angels, pension funds, and whatnot. But now also crowdfunding is being blended in, and there are discussions ongoing now, and they're reaching good points of discussion, if I can say that, where crowdfunding can also be blended in with EU funds, with different structural funds, FC funds, for example, and so on. When we're dealing with crowdfunding, these are the three main actors in the whole space of crowdfunding. So there's the project owner, the person or the group of people or entity that has an idea, that has a venture, and would like to raise funds. They would go to an online platform, which is the crowdfunding platform, submit their project, it gets approved, due diligence is done. Different platforms obviously employ different mechanisms to engage or onboard projects. And once that's live, there is the backer. At this point, I'm calling the individual that funds the project as a backer, which I'll get back to later, because sometimes he's an investor, sometimes he's a donor, but backer sort of is a bit of a generic term that funds or wants to back an idea in some way or another. But why? Sort of what motivates people to actually contribute? Why do people give funds to projects that are placed online, probably not even knowing the individual? And there are obviously three types of returns here. There's the social return, the fact that people want to be involved, want to be part of a project, want to see the project becoming a reality. There's a material benefit that they ought to gain or want to gain. And there's finally the financial return. There are people, obviously, who would like to make money and get a financial return by contributing and being part of projects. And this is the basis of the different types of crowdfunding that were now developed since the term crowdfunding came into fruition. So, as I said, there are two main types, the areas, if we can call them that. One is social crowdfunding and the other one is the financial return. Under social crowdfunding, you would find the donation-based, where people are giving money purely as a donation. The reward-based, where they get something in return, something tangible or intangible in return. But in these two spaces, we're not talking about financial gain. Someone is not investing money or not getting any financial return. In the financial space, there's the lending, where people are giving you a loan, or the equity, where people are becoming part owners, shareholders with you on your idea. And we'll go into this further. You'll hear about other types like civic crowdfunding, real estate crowdfunding, and there are various types that you would hear or Google, you'll see different types. But in my opinion, they always fall under one of these four main categories. They are just different applications of crowdfunding. I mean, you could say blue economy crowdfunding is a specialization because it's funding projects related to the blue economy, but it would be using one of the four types that I had mentioned earlier. To look into these a bit in more detail, the donation model would apply mainly to non-profit, philanthropic projects or charitable projects that are not able or cannot give something in return, but rather people contribute because they want to see them happening. They believe in the idea and they want to help out. The reward base, the return would typically be goods or services, we'll call sort of their perks, where if someone is developing a new product or a new service, people can pre-buy the service before the investment is done and the project goes into in reality. So this is more used for in terms of pre-sales project where you can give something in return. Just to highlight, a reward can mean anything pretty much under the sky, just not a financial return. It could be tangible, non-tangible, an experience. They can get the actual product or the service you're doing. So it could really be anything you can think of, and we'll get to that later. And then the lending model, obviously, like any other loan, when sort of similar to when you go to a bank, there's the payback and the interest that you need to give back. And this is typically used for low-risk investments or when you need an injection of cash at the beginning to be able to raise funds to start something, and then you'll be able to pay back over a number of years. In this case, you as the product owner, you would be able to specify the rates and the term and the conditions, and people have to consider the terms you're offering, whether they are good for them or not. The last model is the equity, where the return is actually ownership. They take part of the idea. So you can be saying, I'm giving 10% of my project for $500,000 or so. And that is where you would be doing sort of the proper valuations and proper due diligence, where people are becoming actual shareholders with you. This is used typically for startups, high-risk investments, or growing companies where they need that injection, that capital injection, to grow or internationalize or whatever they're embarking on. Just a brief history or fun facts, if I can call them that, about crowdfunding, although we refer to crowdfunding, sort of the term crowdfunding joined together as a new and innovative way of raising funds. It was actually, in my opinion, one of the first cases was in 1606, where the Dutch East India Company had actually issued a call to sell shares in their company, which it is pretty much very similar to what we do now in crowdfunding, but obviously traditional means were used at the time. Another example is by Alexander Pope, where to carry out the translations of Homer's writings, he actually promised the people funding the idea to be listed, as you can see there, as the subscribers on the actual manuscript. So it was a first way of reward crowdfunding employed there. Another interesting fact, Mozart also used this mechanism where he promised to write the names of the people that contributed in the manuscript for his songs, for his pieces. And actually, something I want to highlight in this case, the first attempt that he did, he actually failed. He did not reach his ultimate objective, and he had to do it for the second time to be successful. I wanted to highlight this to show that obviously crowdfunding, now I'll explain what failing means or when it's not successful, but even people, geniuses like Mozart, sometimes would struggle and need to adjust their project as they go along. The last example I'll give in this case, in the sort of in the old history, is the example that most people would say this is where crowdfunding sort of kind of kicked off, where the actual pedestal of the Statue of Liberty was funded by the different individuals, where they issued a call for people to fund. And as you can see from that cutting, there were different reward levels. For $1 you get something, for $5 you get something else. And this is what we mimic now in the modern era of crowdfunding. Something to highlight before we go into the next slide, actually, if we have to see the complete history of the modern crowdfunding, the first time the term crowdfunding was used was in 2011 as a result of the financial crisis at the time, where people resorted to online platforms to raise finance for their projects or their work, which was initially, it started off to fund artists and to fund bands into developing music. And now in 2019, 2020, we've seen a shift by the European Commission, where it's recognizing crowdfunding as one of the pillars for startups and different projects. And in fact, just last week, it issued a new set of rules that would harmonize the market for all EU member states, which is also quite a breakthrough for the industry. So the industry is currently quite hyped up with this new, let's say, supposedly new ease of access to the markets in the European Union, so that we will see a boost and a growth in the industry, even though it's been growing for a while now. The industry will certainly grow, especially with the blending of EU funds, structural funds, and also other institutions joining in. The importance of crowdfunding for the various projects, including Blue Economy, startups, any initiative, is basically because it fits there in how this chart is describing as the value of debt. It's the beginning of the lifetime of a project, where it's not yet bankable, where it's not yet attracting business angels or venture capitalists, but it attracts people who are willing to take the high risks and high return in that initial phase. And this is where it is very important that we find alternatives in that space to help people get out of that difficult period and then launch them into the growth that comes thereafter. what made crowdfunding possible? Obviously, the internet, the use of technology made it grow exponentially. Then the payment services, the payment gateways that were created, and the payment services directive are helping, obviously, this industry to grow. But what made it really successful, and that is social media, I believe. The joining the two technologies, the internet and the online payments, together with social media, that you can pass on your message out there to the public, to the world, made crowdfunding grow, and where funds could easily or sort of could be raised from around the world. The idea, this is a bit of a technical discussion, but just to mention it, it's because this social media made possible that small projects that do not attract media attention, or they don't have the capability to do massive marketing campaigns, are still possible and can still be funded because of the spread that you can get organically through social media and the internet. So from this slide, you can see that most projects are less than 20,000 when it comes to reward-based, especially with some projects obviously reaching also millions. But the idea I'm trying to give here is that even for small projects, this sort of funding is ideal, because you can reach out to various people and de-risk amongst the number of individuals to give you a small amount of money. The most common types of crowdfunding from this chart, as you can see, the top 5 or 6 are related to lending. So lending is quite popular in the world, global by volume. And then also the reward-based and donation-based are also quite strong in terms of million, keeping in mind that the projects tend to be smaller. So to raise 1 million in reward-based crowdfunding, you need various projects, while in lending or in equity, 1 million can be raised by just one project. So this is something to keep in mind. In terms of the types of crowdfunding popular by application or by area, we can see that it's also quite well spread between financial and donation and reward. I highlighted there the energy and environment because obviously we're dealing with the blue economy, but blue economy initiatives, as also Samuel was talking about, widening a bit the definition, they could be business and entrepreneurial initiatives, they could be social causes as well that are dealing with the sea, and would fall under also the blue economy, or science and technology, for example. So it's important to pin your project to a type and then see which type of crowdfunding is suited best for your project. What are the key aspects of crowdfunding? First of all, keep in mind that a crowdfunding campaign is something which has a specific target, a preset target, and a preset time aspect to it. For example, 30 to 60 days, where you would need to raise the funds according to the target that you had set in the first place. Especially when you're dealing with donation or reward-based models, but this can also apply in some platforms to equity and loan. There are 2 types of campaigns as well. One is all or nothing, the other one is keep it all. All or nothing means you need to raise the money you set as your target. If you do not raise the target amount, you do not keep any of the money. So all the money will return to the backers because you didn't reach your target. This is a bit of a safety mechanism to increase the confidence in backers, as they know that if you are not successful, you can't deliver on your promises, they will get their money back, and so they're not scared in being the first or the first few people to contribute. Otherwise, without this, which means to keep it all, that is, whatever you raise, you keep, even if you do not reach your target, is mostly used for philanthropic campaigns or scalable projects that can grow according to the funds raised. But obviously, the advantage is that you get to keep the money that was raised and try to supplement it elsewhere. But the disadvantage is that it decreases a bit the confidence on the backers, because they tend to wait and see what others are doing before they contribute themselves. So there's a bit of pro and cons that you need to consider in that case. Most platforms operate with all or nothing, but you'll find keep it all types out there as well. What makes a good campaign? And I always highlight 4 main things when it comes to crowdfunding campaigns. The first one is the pitch. You need to tell people what you're doing, what's your project, and who will benefit from it, what are the benefits, and who you are. Why should people trust you with their money? What are your credentials, testimonials that you might have, or experience in terms of delivering of what you promise. This is typically done on various crowdfunding platforms in 2 formats. One is a video, is an appeal video, a 1 minute, 2 minute video, where you share your idea in a video format. And the other one is in text, where you can go into further detail on who's the team behind it, what are you doing, the reasons why you're doing it, and answer more questions there. Obviously, the video is more catchy, easily to spread on social media, and people are more likely to press on a play button than read text, but it's good to have both formats to give all the details. The second part is the reward. Obviously, here I'm referring to reward-based crowdfunding, but this applies also to lending, to equity. What are people getting in return? What kind of interest rate are you offering? What equity are you offering? Or what rewards are people offering? This is very important, because obviously people will associate the money they're giving you with value. So they need to get their money's worth in order to fund your project and feel that they're part of this project, rather than just giving you money, unless it's obviously a donation based, but they want to gain something out of it. The third part is the funding target. As I mentioned, this is very important, especially when it's an all or nothing campaign, but it's also important because it needs to be realistic, reachable, but also that allows you to deliver on the promises you're promising. So it has to be quite well calculated, well budgeted, and well planned for various reasons. And this also motivates people to see that you know what you're saying. I mean, if I'm explaining a huge project, but then only ask for 5K, then evidently I don't know what I'm doing, or I might be a fraudster, or whatnot. So it's very important that your funding target, it's well planned and well thought of. Lastly, the promotion. So obviously this is a crowdfunding. You need the crowd, so the crowd needs to know about you. So reach out to various individuals, various entities, use social media, the paid media if need be. So obviously the promotional campaign behind it needs to be also well planned. These are the things that I like to highlight. I don't need to go through them all now, also to give some time for questions, but I wanted to put them there, even if you ask the Gozo Business Chamber to share this presentation with you. You can see them there, and some of them are common sense, you would say. Like evaluate your idea, see if it's applicable to crowdfunding. Is it suited to be crowdfunded? Learn from others, see what others are doing, and what worked, what didn't work, and plan accordingly. Get up your social media so that you can, your contact list, so that you can obviously communicate this further. But it's important, there are things there that you ought to keep in mind. And in terms of ZAAR, we also have a guidebook that we can easily share with you and with the Gozo Business Chamber for future reference for your projects. The campaign, again, important things to keep in mind when you're planning a campaign. Some of them I already mentioned, of course, but there are other things that you need to keep in mind. Imagery, especially when you're dealing with projects related to the blue economy, the sea. You can easily use good imagery to portray your message and give a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve. Regular updates, the promotion, these are all things that you need to keep in mind when setting up a campaign. There is this notion that crowdfunding is easier funding than It could be if your project is well planned, but obviously there is an element of planning that you need to do. It's not a matter of launching a project, filling up a form online, launching it there and just waiting and see, but it's also a lot of work that needs to be done, but the benefit can also be substantial. This one of the last messages here, I always highlight as very, very important. In all the planning, in all the preparation, in all the considerations you're doing, you have to always think like a backer. What would your backer want to read about you? What would the backer want to read about the project and the initiative you're doing, as well as what rewards you would want to achieve, and then obviously prepare it and communicate it to your backers. The last thing, very important, is thank your backers, keep in communication with your backers even after the campaign, as your reputation is on the line and you might need to use crowdfunding again and involve the crowd again to later projects. So it's important that even if you're failing, even if you didn't deliver on what you promised completely, communicate with the audience and keep them updated with the progress and difficulties you're encountering. Some examples that we can share from our platform related to also the C, the blue. One campaign, this was pretty much a donation base where people were raising funds, an organization was raising funds to post various sea bins in different ports and harbors or marinas in Malta. This was one of them, and they've been quite successful in implementing different sea bins around Malta. Something to highlight with this example as well, it's something I'll come to it when I'm talking about the benefits, but it's worth mentioning now. In this case, crowdfunding was good because they raised funds through the platform and through crowdfunding, but also during the campaign, they were contacted by corporates and other institutions to help them fund other sea bins. So this is one advantage of crowdfunding that I'll be mentioning later, is that because you're doing this publicly and you're communicating and your marketing strategy behind this will generate more interest and more funding might come in from different sources that complements the crowdfunding itself. Another example, this was a new initiative, a new business in Malta that wanted to start using or delivering different marine tours, fish watching and a nature tour, and they also raised funds to build up on the equipment on the boat and launch their services through the platform. An example in an international platform, this is also a reward-based model where a smart pedal boat was funded through a platform on Kickstarter, in this case, where they raised funds to be able to sell and start the project before they even started developing the product. So they use this also as market validation, where you can preempt the production you need to do and whether there is a market for your idea. So this leads me to the other benefit. I listed a couple there. I'll just mention briefly the main ones. As mentioned before, you can use it as pre-sales, so you can generate sales even before investing in your project or starting your project. You create awareness, promotion, and attract media attention, which can lead to other benefits as well. And lastly, it's also a validation to see whether your project is actually wanted, whether it's needed, and whether people out there are happy to see it happening as well. Obviously, there are some barriers to crowdfunding worth mentioning. Not all ideas are appealing to crowdfunding. Some of them might not appeal to the public, but they're useful and you believe in them anyway. So it's important to make sure the way you pitch it is good for crowdfunding. There are timing issues, the charisma and the networking that people need to embark on when doing crowdfunding. Tax and legal considerations that you need to keep in mind. As I said, from a legal perspective, next year it should be getting easier for international projects, but obviously some considerations need to be taken care of when dealing with crowdfunding. And the last thing is a personal matter. There's a risk of failing, there's a risk of sharing some information, and people tend to fear these two and not embark into a crowdfunding campaign because of this. It is important to mention here that failing, obviously, it's not a complete failure, because you will gain anything anyway from even a failed campaign. So you'll gain knowledge, you'll gain traction, and maybe some other contacts, or you can tweak your idea to fit the market better. But certainly failing in a crowdfunding campaign is certainly a zero gain experience, obviously. Lastly, I'll share my contact details there, email and our website. Should you require any more information, I'm obviously here available to answer questions. I tried to sort of be concise as possible, and obviously thank you again for your attention, and I'll leave it up to the floor for any questions.
We can now see any questions that we have. You can post in the Q&A session, which you have at the bottom of the screen. So one of the questions that we have, are there any legal tax constraints for SMEs or startups in raising funds through crowdfunding?
Yes, I mean, there are tax and legal considerations you need to keep in mind. So various jurisdictions, because I'm aware there's an international audience here, various jurisdictions have different applications for crowdfunding. So most of the time, reward-based and donation-based, so SMEs and startups can use the reward-based model, tend to be pretty much unregulated, and not a lot of considerations need to be taken care of there. From tax, yes, you need to take this into consideration in terms of VAT and income tax. As any other business, it's any other income. In terms of raising equity or loan, it would depend on the jurisdiction. Malta is quite restrictive. In fact, it's also restrictive on the platforms, and that's why there are no platforms in Malta operating in this space. But as I said, the EU regulation should make this easier from next year, and therefore we assume we will be one of them interested in setting up a platform in Malta for investment and loan. So yes, there are certain implications that you need to keep in mind depending on your jurisdiction, but I suggest in that case you speak to the platform you intend on using, and speak to them, as they would be able to guide you better depending on your jurisdiction.
Thanks, Matthew. Another question that we have is, any tips for successfully attracting the backers? What should we pay attention to, that is, in our communication or in choosing specific platforms rather than others?
Okay, so in terms of attracting backers and the tips, some of them I mentioned during my my presentation. I'm not sure at what time that question came in. There are certainly tips that I can share with you, especially generic terms. So obviously, good value for money, good, transparent, and well-detailed communication. And obviously, you need to increase confidence in backers that you actually know what you're doing. When it comes to actual rewards or returns, obviously each project is different, and it would be very unfair on various projects to give examples here. But we can certainly guide you on that should you want to get in touch. In terms of the platforms, the shows of platforms, I would suggest it would depend a lot on the type of projects you're in. When you're dealing with reward-based crowdfunding, the majority of the funds need to come from your network. So irrespective of which platform to use, you have to work on most of the backers. The platform, there's a rule of thumb that sort of it's 80-20, the platform will generate 20%. However, there are some sectors and some fields that have a specific, more niche crowdfunding platforms, which you ought to think about if you're trying to use something related, that there is actually some platform which is dealing with your area, as obviously the network they have is more inclined to donating. But again, it's a bit of a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Another question that we have, it's addressed to both Samuel and Matthew. How do you see the economic potential of new ideas in the blue economy within this economic scenario?
Well, shall I start myself?
Yes, you can, Samuel.
Okay, so yes, I think the blue economy for the European Commission is something very important, and given of this, the present situation, I'm sure that the European Union is working at exploiting and exploring all possible avenues at creating or supporting business, but creating new ones. And we have to say that this initiative of the West Med was seen by the European Union as something that could bring together the 5+5 countries in the Mediterranean. And we all know that if the Mediterranean was truly exploited in a good way, the economic potential that there is huge. So what the European Union is looking is that at countries partnering together and regions partnering together. This is why this is also very important for the European Committee of the Regions. So the EU is shifting the ball in the sense that it's not looking only at projects between countries, but cross-regional. So my recommendation here is for anyone interested in accessing funds or even blending together with crowdfunding to find partners in not only in EU countries, which is normally, well, let's say not the easiest, but certainly easier than the other 5 countries. Being, let me find the list so I don't leave anyone out. Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, and Tunisia. If you have a partner in this country, the EU will look more favorably in the sense that you have a cross-regional now project. This is very important. The EU has seen that limiting funds only to between countries has not reached the goals of the European Union to be felt on the ground. So that's why it's going to the sub-national level. And this is an area, if you see statistics of the opportunities that there are in the blue economy, one would practically, if we take Malta as a country, or the other islands in the Mediterranean, technically everything that happened on the island can practically fall under blue economy. We would need also a bit of more time in the sense that this initiative is something of 2017, 2018. So it is quite recent, but it's been, even the Commission was keen on it, and it is furthering the initiatives here. So it will be something that we have to further see being developed. Seizing the opportunity early on, I think will be beneficial for everyone, especially in the current situation.
Thank you, Samuel. Matthew?
I think Samuel listed most of the points in the current scenario where, so the opportunities, in my opinion, are there. Like with any crisis, with any difficulty, there are also opportunities. So we need to work on those. One of them being that this pandemic or the current economic situation raised more awareness, in my opinion, with respect to environmental issues and taking care of the environment, or for sustainable businesses, sustainable choices. It also developed, for example, in Malta, the situation, and this is where it's good for crowdfunding. Statistics are showing that in some cases, like Malta, the level of savings of people actually increased because the spending is less. So there is the opportunity to tap into this. People who are obviously scared of losing their job, or there is an economic downturn, obviously exist. But there are other people that actually benefited from this and are looking to delve into new areas and new ideas. So I think, like any other, as I said before, just to keep it short, with any crisis, there are also opportunities. The financial crisis brought new ideas, new innovation, and I think this is where countries, governments, and regions should work hard in promoting these new ideas, new innovations that now can take space. They can take the attention from media and from the people, because the priorities of people changed, the mentality of some people changed, and the difficulties that people are facing might attract them to some ideas as opposed to the other so-called traditional.
Thank you very much. Another question which was posted in the chat, but which is from Daniela Malia. If the crowdfunding is equity-based, how will this equity holder appear on the memorandum and articles of association of the company?
So there are there are various models this can be done. Different platforms are applying different ways of doing it. In some cases, platforms act as a nominee, so they would be so the platform would actually appear on the cap table of the entity selling equity, and they are then responsible of getting the votes and communication with the different investors. But it's the platform that is appearing on M&A and the cap table of the entity. Some people are taking the way of creating a special purpose vehicle, where in some cases a lead investor is put as sort of responsible for that SPV, and that SPV, its only purpose is to buy and own the shares of that company, again to keep the cap table sort of short for the startup or the SME or whatever. In some cases, it's purely the platform doesn't get involved, and all the investors would end up shareholders directly on the entity. So it really depends, and this is where, again, leading to the previous question, is the choice of platform. You need to see what's available and how you would want to structure the investment you're raising. But there are various options, and each of them has obviously their positives and negatives. You need to consider all your options before moving forward.
Thank you. Now we have a note from George Hassanitis from Insular. You know that this project is part of the crowdfunding project, which is being managed. Insular is a partner together with other organizations, and he highlighted that Insular will be funding the campaigns of 2 SMEs on crowdfunding, and an open call will follow on time. So those who are following us, this is something to note, and are also interested in the blue economy. This is something which is to be noted. Another question that we have, in your opinion, wouldn't crowdfunding also cause opportunistic behavior? If yes, how can this be avoided? Thanks.
So my understanding of this question is you're referring to instances where the project owner can take advantage of the public, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yes.
And in this case, Yes, like any other business deal, like any other transaction, there can be malicious intentions. And this is why it's important that the campaign owner is actually very clear, very transparent in their communication as to minimize this risk and give confidence to the backers to believe and understand that you are genuine. So a clear explanation of budgets, of targets can certainly help in giving confidence to the backer. There were cases where the fraudsters took advantage of people, certainly, but that happens in all business transactions. So it's also important that you see what due diligence the platforms undertake. For example, we meet with each and every product owner. We speak to them, we understand their budgets, do certain due diligence in order to make sure that the project is real and that they have the credentials to deliver. Other platforms is simply fill in a form and you're up and running. But obviously, I'm not saying that means all their projects are fraudulent by no means at all. But yes, there are these instances, and you as a backer need to ask questions where in doubt and communicate with the backer with the owner before giving money to put your mind at rest, basically.
Thank you, Matthew. Another question that we have, what would be a reasonable time frame for raising funds from the day we upload our project on a platform? Is there a limit in time to be set or some good practice example?
So in terms of setting up your campaign on the platform, it's really pretty much up to you. We had campaigns that were started preparing the work and were done in a week, obviously for smaller projects and certain projects, but there are also others that took months to finish. It would really depend on the preparation and the timing that you would want to embark on. In terms of time frame for the campaign itself, then the recommendation is 1 month, 2 months maximum. Some platforms allow you to extend it, but some platforms don't. And that is a good time. A month is a good time frame to raise your funds. Doesn't mean you can't secure funds before the campaign, which is also a good idea. It's actually a good case, good practice to commit to get commitment from people to give funds before the campaign is issued publicly. Something also to keep in mind is the timing between your campaign, the ending of the campaign, which would probably be a month later, and also when you'll be able to deliver on your promises, on your reward. Some campaigns have a year gap between that, some campaigns a couple of months. It would obviously depend on the product or the promise, the reward that you're giving, but it's something you need to think as a backer and say, would a backer back me if my reward is in a year's time or if it's in a month's time, and work accordingly, because every campaign is different as well.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Another question that we have from George Assonitis, is it possible to ask for crowdfunding on a more extended geographical area than on a local level?
Yes, one of the advantages of crowdfunding platforms is that they're online, accessible from all over the world, and you can get backing from all over the world. And there are some restrictions, especially when you're dealing with investment side, that you can't actively target people in other jurisdictions. Again, the new regulations will facilitate this, but currently I can't raise funds in Malta for an investment. I don't know, translate my my details into, let's say, German and target German investors because I'm not licensed in that jurisdiction. So there are some limitations there. However, if a German investor comes to you because they saw it online and you didn't actively target them, they can also still participate in your campaign. Reward-based and donation-based pretty much all over the world can contribute. Obviously, some platforms have limitations, but obviously that's not crowdfunding in general. So yes, we as well as our platforms, we're a small platform from a small country, and we also had campaigns that raise funds from Australia, US, UK, France, Germany, wherever. So it is really one of major advantage of crowdfunding, where you can internationalize your fundraiser quite instantly.
Thank you, Matthew. A question that was posted on our chat from Daniela Malia. The company collecting the funds, will they need some sort of license, given that it will have in-hand funds collected from the public? I think this question was on a national level here in Malta.
So on a national level, if you're raising funds as a reward based, you're basically, it's pretty much e-commerce, just that your product will be shipped later. It's pre-sales. So those general conditions apply in terms of that you need to be licensed to sell, to trade, be registered as a company to sell. But you can also raise funds on a reward base when you haven't yet set up. As an individual, you can raise funds for that. If you're raising funds as a donation model or for charity or as a donation, you would need a police permit to be able to raise funds locally.
Thanks, Matthew, very much for your interesting insights that you provided. It was an eye-opener even for me on a lot of aspects and issues. I myself am going to pose a question to Samuel as well. So Samuel, from my end, where are we seeing the EU moving? Just right now, we had the pandemic, which maybe destroyed all plans, and practically the European Commission and the countries moved everything to contrasting the effects of the pandemic. But what are you seeing in terms? You are the blue economy representative of the Committee of the Region, so you have close information there. Where are you seeing this moving on in the coming months and years?
Good question. Yes. No, I think the EU is adopting a two-way approach. It's trying to support and sustain what we already have and trying to find new avenues. As I've said in my original delivery, the key to this is constant innovation. And the EU understood this even before the pandemic. The more we innovate, the more we remain adaptable to ever-changing scenarios. The European Commission has already released the largest financial package in its history as aid to countries in the form of financial instruments, in the form of grants, in the form of loans, in the form of support. Many financial instruments were made available to all countries, including Malta, including insular regions, and like, for example, our Gozo. What I believe is, even the pragmatism shown by the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, is that Europe cannot relent. Europe cannot relent on its projects. Europe is there. When it comes to pandemic, the European Union has understood that some things that used to be farmed out to other countries, that countries needs to be on the ground in the European Union. So there will be a chunk of the EU budget going to make sure the European Union is self-sustainable on many things, whilst not, of course, disregarding any trade deals the EU has with other countries. But I think that projects, niches like the blue economy, will be areas the EU will make its utmost to see flourish as something new of something that is very old. I mean, maritime policies, the marine environment, the blue economy is something as old as man. So the EU will see that if this is a success, is one of the areas of successes, it will definitely benefit a very large region, which is made of EU countries and neighboring countries, a region which, as I've said before, has yet to understand its full potential. The mass unemployment problems that are present in many countries of the Mediterranean are not as a result of the pandemic, but definitely with the pandemic, we've seen surges. So the EU will want to tackle this and will tackle this. Of course, it depends also on how these 5+5 countries make it also a priority to them. We have to understand that the European Union does not exist on its own, but at the end of the day is made of member states. So it is up to us to pressure our governments, our local bodies, our regional bodies, to make sure this remains high on the agenda. If we manage to do that, the blue economy will be one of the areas the EU will want to invest in. But having made this declaration just barely 3 years ago is something very important. It means that it is high on the agenda. If not, the EU will just have supported the 5+5 dialogue without making it something of its own. So the European Commission would want that something that it's made its own, like this initiative on the WestMed, will be brought to fruition. And in the past years, in the last 3 years, we've seen high-level meetings, even ministers' meetings from different countries with the EU bodies invited and present. I myself was invited to all these meetings. So this is very, very important for us, especially Mediterranean islands, especially from those 5+5 countries, to make sure this remains high. So it's up to us as well.
Thank you, Samuel, for that very true answer that you gave us. It's true, it's the potential of the blue economy is very high. And today we have seen actually how we can combine it also with financing tools that can put also these into fruition together also in the coming years with EU funds. We have a question from Daniela Mallia. Legislation in Malta is still not final in terms of crowdfunding. In view of this, can Maltese companies already get involved in crowdfunding, or do they have to wait for the legislation to become effective?
So the legislation with respect to crowdfunding in Malta is pretty much final. Then the interpretation of MFSA is there. What MFSA did was implement MiFID regulations onto the area of crowdfunding. In my opinion, then the obligations on the platforms there are not really proportionate, and therefore no platform is operating in Malta in terms of investment. Having said that, there are some ways a company can raise funds anyway, not through a public call. So, I mean, seeking investment can be done, but not publicly, and depending on and being careful on the marketing you're doing. However, Maltese companies were also successful. We have examples where Maltese companies have raised equity crowdfunding on foreign platforms. This is not very easy to achieve, I understand, and that's why we want a platform in Malta, because there are legal obligations and you need to have an address in the country and so on. So certain platforms have different restrictions. There are some platforms which are opening up more, so that's also good. Lastly, yes, in a year's time, because the law was actually published now in the EU journal, but it needs 12 months to come into force, where the EU harmonized rules will apply. And therefore, platforms will be able to opt to be licensed under the new EU regime, not under the local regime. And therefore, platforms would be then able to operate, in my opinion, better in Malta. And therefore, there is the chance of more platforms coming up, opening or being able to service Maltese companies, and you can raise funds on them. Having said that, although a year time seems a long time, when raising finance, it's also good to plan ahead, so you can still start the process of valuation of the information you need to give, and in order to be able to attract funds. Again, you can still raise equity finance, but not through what we described here as crowdfunding as a public call over the internet, because no, that is not possible. You would need to do it through a platform, and there are no platforms in Malta operating. So I know I gave you a bit of a long question, a long answer, but unfortunately, different, especially when you're dealing with legal terms, you need to be very careful, because it's again, you need to see your scenario and see what exactly you're after.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. Now I'm going to ask for the closing interventions of each panelist. I will start from someone.
My message is one. I mean, this is a subject where also the chamber knows, the president of Insular. I always talk about blue economy everywhere I go, even with the newly set up authority in Gozo is proposed, as you also know, Daniel, the blue economy. I feel that this is something that should be endorsed. And I would like to thank you in particular, because the blend of what we did today with the panel, I speaking about EU funds and Matthew about crowdfunding, shows exactly where the EU also wants to go. The EU wants to depart from the mentality that everything has to revolve around projects financed by the EU solely by public money. Seeing this as an aspect where crowdfunding is like by public subscription rather than by public money coming from EU coffers, shows that this is a niche where the private and public sector can really come together and work together. I know that we are sometimes in a comfort zone and we are afraid. This is especially when we're islands, the sea makes us afraid. We're afraid of it. And the blue necessarily entails the sea. Of the blue economy, but I think we should really look forward and not inwards. And as the wealth of the Mediterranean in every aspect is something that should be fully exploited. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Matthew?
Well, first of all, thank you for all the questions. Very interesting. It's good to have questions from the audience. Thank you to you, Daniel, for organizing this as well, the Business Chamber and Insular. And as you can see, there is interest in crowdfunding. There is a potential, I believe, in crowdfunding. We need to continue working for the legislations to be in place in order to facilitate this. It is important that projects come into fruition, ideas come into fruition, and are tried out, especially in an industry or in a sector like the blue economy, where it's, at least usually, it's also dealing with sustainable businesses, sustainable ideas, and sustainable tourism as well. So we do need to facilitate the way people can raise finances, as it's one of the major barriers to these new initiatives, in order to not to lose out on ideas simply because there were no funds available. So the blending of EU and crowdfunding, exposing the concept of crowdfunding more to the public, and raising investor awareness that people can actually invest in the new ideas rather than just keeping money in bank accounts which return nothing, or investing in property, which I think we have enough of that. So it's good to give options, and if anyone has other questions, feel free to get in touch with me, and we'll be very happy to assist and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you very much, Matthew. We now come to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank both panelists for their very interesting insights they provided us today. It was a mind opener on many aspects. As both as a chamber and also as Insular, we have spoken a lot about the importance of diversification in our economy. Our island economies have shown that they cannot rely solely on one industry, such, for example, if we speak from our island on construction and tourism. So this could be the option for the future to diversify the economy while respecting the environment, so in terms of sustainability. So I would like to thank you for accepting our invitation today. I sincerely hope that this webinar was fruitful to all those who participated. Even as you know, we put it online on our social media, so you can see it there whenever you want, and we will post it also on our YouTube channel. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Matthew, very much. A special note of thanks also goes to Richard Gregg, who has been the technical coordinator on this webinar. Thanks, Richard. Thanks also to our president, Joseph Borch, who, despite his busy schedule, he's always available to us. And as regards the participant, we will be sending you a link after the webinar in order for you to provide us with your feedback. And we sincerely hope that you give us your feedback. Finally, I would like to invite you to continue following us on our webpage, Facebook page, and thanks again for joining us today. Thanks.
Thank you.